In 1959, 9 hikers walked into a snow-covered mountain range and were never seen again. What investigators found was more than just a gruesome crime scene. It was one of the most notorious unsolved mysteries ever. People reported strange lights in the sky, radiation on clothing, maybe even a government cover-up. And this might all sound like science fiction, but this is a true story that actually happened deep in the Russian wilderness. And today, what happened to those 9 hikers is still unsolved, and yet many theories abound. Was it the Russian military that did an operation that went sideways? Was it an avalanche? Was it ravenous animals? Was it aliens, or was it even a Yeti? The truth about what happened out there is still a mystery. But the clear evidence of something unexplainable happening is what drives investigators crazy. Now, this is the Dyatlov Pass Incident. So, sit back, relax, and welcome to camp. What's up, people, and welcome back to camp. My name is Mark Gagnon, and thank you for joining me in my tent, where every single week we explore the most interesting, fascinating, controversial stories from around the world from all times. Yes, this is a real-life Ripley's Believe It or Not book that got turned into a show somehow. Yes, this is what we do here, all right? I'm sure you're like, oh, Mark, when are you going to talk about what's going on in the world? The wars, the stuff, the politics. That's not what we do here, all right? We are down for solving unsolved mysteries from 50 years ago. That's what we do here, okay? So welcome to the show. And thanks for coming to my tent, all right? You're always welcome to hang out with me in this cozy little, this little cozy nook that I have deep in the woods, far, far away in Brooklyn, New York. And as always, I'm joined by my dear friend Christos, the Greek freak himself, the legend from Athens. The hammer is what they call him. Thor's hammer, right?
Sure.
What's a Greek god?
Hercules.
Hercules is yes, the Hercules is hammer, dude. That's awesome. You are Greek, right?
Fully.
All right. Enough, Christos, okay? It's all this yapping about your heritage. Today, we're not talking about the Greeks or the Americans. We're talking about the Russians. Technically the Soviets, but I'll probably use that interchangeably. Before we begin this, I also just want to point out, I'm not Russian. So I'm going to mess up a lot of these words. I'm going to do my best, okay? I've read very many articles about this, and I'm going to try with my best Russian accent, all right? So my apologies on the outset. Where does our story begin? I'm glad you asked. January 1959 in the Ural Polytechnical Institute. There's this 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov who is organizing what would become his most ambitious hiking expedition yet. Now, Dyatlov was already known amongst his peers as a very experienced outdoorsman. He had led multiple treks through the Ural Mountains and had a reputation for planning and safety and was very meticulous in everything that he did. For this expedition, he assembled a team of 8 other hikers, all with significant experience, but also with jobs you wouldn't expect an experienced hiker to have. The group included 2 radio engineers. Again, I'm going to do my best with the names. Zinaida Kolmogorova, who had been on previous hikes with Dyatlov, and Georgy Krivonchenko, who worked at a nuclear facility. There were then 2 mechanical engineering students, Rustem Slobodin, Nicholas Thibault Brionel, 2 economics majors, Yuri Doronchenko and Yuri Yudin, a nuclear engineering student, Alexander Kolevatov, and finally the 9th member was Alexander Zolotaryov, who was significantly older than the others. Zolotaryov was an experienced mountaineer and a World War II veteran who had actually been added to the group simply so that the group could meet the requirements to go on this university expedition. Now, this hike required a grade 3 certification. This is the highest level of difficulty in Soviet hiking classifications, meaning that they had to bring either an instructor or someone with, just a ton of mountain experience. So Zolotaryov was the guy. Now, their planned route would take them through some of the most remote terrain in the northern Urals. This expedition was designed to cover approximately 190 miles over 16 days, starting from the town of Visay, ending in the village of Visay after making a large loop through this remote Soviet wilderness. This route would take them past several significant peaks, with their main goal being to reach the top of Ortenton Mountain. After a few days of waiting, their expedition was eventually approved by the Institute Sports Club and basically registered with the local authorities. All of this is required for a serious hiking expedition in the Soviet Union. Now, Dyatlov submitted detailed, plans and emergency procedures, and the group was expected to send a telegram confirming their return by February 12th. So, the journey begins on January 23rd, 1959. The 9 hikers took a train to the town of Serov, then continued a bus to Vizhai, the last sort of inhabited settlement before just the wilderness. When they arrived in Vizhai, they hired a truck to take them as far as possible into the forest before they actually began their trek on foot. Now, the group was extremely well equipped for these harsh conditions, and they knew basically exactly what they were going to be facing, or so they thought. They carried a large tent designed for winter camping, warm clothing, food for the entire expedition, cameras to document the journey, and various pieces of standard hiking equipment, including axes and knives, navigation tools, everything you need. And on January 27th, they began their trek on foot. The weather was already getting, rough with snow and strong winds, but nothing that this, experienced group of hikers hadn't ever seen before. They made good progress the first few days, following their planned route, and maintained their schedule exactly. But on January 28th, the first complication arose. Yuri Yudin began experiencing severe knee and back pain that made it impossible for him to continue. After consulting with Dyatlov and the rest of the group, they decided that Yudin should turn back while he could still make it to safety. Yudin then returned to Vizhai on his own, leaving the remaining 8 members to continue towards Altertin Mountain, and this decision ultimately saved his life. After Yudin left, the group of 8 continued to go deeper into the wilderness. Based on their diaries and the photographs that were found later, they seemed to be in good spirits, making good progress, despite obviously the harsh weather. Kolmogorova actually wrote, "We are having an unusually good time. I can hardly believe we feel so good here." As they continued, the trail carried them through thick forest where the trees were giving them a little bit of shelter from the snow, but eventually the snowfall made the terrain rise that actually forced them to move their camp again. The higher they climbed, the more the wind would tear across the slopes and the more exposed they became. On January 31st, Rustem Slobodin wrote, "Cold, piercing wind. It's hard to imagine such a thing in a city." This goes to show that, again, no amount of training or classrooms could really prepare them for what these mountains were actually throwing at them. The very next day, on February 1st, the group was approaching what was now known as Dyatlov Pass, an area between 2 peaks that offered a potential route for their destination. The weather had just gotten worse, the winds were stronger, the snow was falling even more, but still nothing beyond what, these experienced hikers could handle, or, nothing out of the unexpected, you could say. Based on the evidence that's found later, they made camp that evening on the slope of what's now called Dead Mountain, literally Kholat Sekal. And this is the language of the Mansi people. And it literally just translates to Dead Mountain. This location that they chose was a little unusual, right? Because experienced hikers would typically avoid camping on this exposed slope, specifically during a storm, and they would try to find shelter in the forest below. Now, we don't know why they chose that particular spot, but there are many theories as to what happened. Perhaps they got lost in the weather conditions, and some people even say that they deliberately chose that spot for training purposes so they could actually test their equipment or their skills in the conditions that they really never got to experience. Either way, the group chose this spot, not expecting it to be their final place setting up camp. The final photo the group took shows them digging out a hole for their tents on the side of the slope, and it's honestly pretty morbid when you realize that just a few hours later, all the people in this image would be gone. By February 12th, it was clear that the group failed to send their expected telegram, and there was initially no immediate alarm. Delayed returns were pretty common, specifically for these types of expeditions when the weather conditions were challenging and changing so quickly. But as the days passed with no word, the hikers' families and the instructors at their school became concerned. So on February 20th, a search party was put together to go find the hikers. And after 6 days of traveling the same dangerous path that Dyatlov and his team took, the search party found the abandoned tent on the slope of Death Mountain. But what they discovered on this mountain would puzzle investigators for decades. The tent had been cut open, but here's what's strange. It had been cut open from the inside, with several long slashes made by a knife or something sharp, and the rips made it look like the tent had been abandoned really quickly, but there was no signs of an internal struggle. And here's another weird part. Most of the group's belongings are still inside, including boots and warm coats and all their essential cold weather gear. They also found footprints in the snow that led away from the tent and actually went downhill towards a nearby tree line about a mile away. But not all of the tracks were made from shoes. It appeared that some of the hikers had left the tent barefoot, or just in their socks. But the strangest detail about the footprints is that they didn't look like they were made in distress necessarily, as if someone was running away. They almost looked like they were calmly and evenly spaced out, almost as if the hikers were almost casually walking down the slope. And as the search for the missing hikers continued, the searchers would have way more questions than they bargained for. The first two bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonoshenko, were found on February 27th, about a mile from the tent. They were found lying under a cedar tree next to the remains of a small campfire. But the weird thing is that both of them were found barefoot, wearing only their underwear, and the cedar tree they were under showed signs that someone had climbed it. Branches were broken from the top, and there was even pieces of flesh from the two guys' hands stuck in the bark as if they kept climbing it over and over again. But whether it was in a desperate attempt to flee something, or maybe to gather firewood or try to see a vantage point, we don't know. Another thing that investigators found was the fact that Krivonoshenko had a piece of his own hand in his mouth, and the tip of his nose was missing. Not far from the spot, searchers began to find more members of the group. Between the cedar and the tent site, they came across Igor Dyatlov, Zeneda Komogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. However, the way that Dyatlov and the others' bodies were positioned suggested that they had died while trying to make it back to their shelter, possibly after realizing that whatever had driven them away from the tent was now no longer a threat. For 2 months, the search effort continued to try to find the final 4 hikers. And on May 5th, a Mansi native of, the native group that lived there, named Kurikov, was walking with his dog when he noticed some cut branches that were forming almost like a trail near the cedar trees. When he followed the trail, he ended up finding a pair of black cotton sweatpants that had the right leg cut off with a knife. After this discovery, they searched the area and ended up finding a massive den that the surviving hikers had basically dug out in an attempt to get away from the freezing winds. But what they found next to the den would change the entire investigation. Because just a few feet away, investigators dug out a ravine and they discovered the last 4 hikers. But these 4 victims looked completely different from the others. They were wearing more appropriate clothing. They were better dressed, right? They were also wearing clothes that appeared to have been taken from the other 2 who had died first. And even more strange, their injuries were more severe. The autopsy results on the 4 bodies found in the ravine raised a lot of questions about what actually happened that night. Thibaut Brinolel had suffered a major skull fracture that would have been fatal. The injury was described as consistent with a severe blow to the head, but there are no external wounds or other signs of an attack. Dubinina and Zolotorov had suffered multiple broken ribs. Dubinina had 6 broken ribs on one side, 4 on the other, while Zolotorov had 5 broken ribs on one side. Medical examiners claimed that it would have taken the force of like a truck to cause the damage that was done. But the strangest of all, Dubinina was missing her tongue, her eyes, and parts of her face. The medical examiner attributed this to natural decomposition or animal predation, considering her body had been partially submerged in the ravine for several months. However, Zolotorov was also missing his eyes, and both he and Dubinina had what appeared to be chemical burns on their exposed skin and clothing. And get this, maybe one of the weirdest parts, some of their clothing even showed elevated levels of radiation, which of course only deepened the mystery and left anyone working on this case just completely confused as to what was going on. Now, the official Soviet investigation concluded that the hikers had cut their way out of the tent and fled into the harsh winter conditions due to the report called a compelling natural force. That is what was actually put in the report. However, the exact nature of this force is not really specified in any way. And several things actually complicate the investigation. So, first of all, the scene had been disturbed by search teams before a proper forensic examination actually took place. And the remote location made it extremely difficult to conduct a thorough investigation, especially using 1950s forensic methods. The case was classified as having no indication of criminal activity and was ultimately closed in May of 1959. The official cause of death was listed as hypothermia for the first 5 victims and a combination of a hypothermia and physical trauma for the final 4. However, the lead prosecutor in the case, Lev Ivanov, later revealed that he had been ordered to close the case and that certain evidence had been completely classified. He also mentioned reports of strange lights in the sky, what was described as like fireballs on the night of the incident, and these unusual readings on radiation detection equipment. After the case files were classified and sealed, it only added to this mystery and a lot of the speculation about what actually occurred on the mountain. Now for everybody's favorite part of everything, conspiracy theories. Yes, a personal fascination of mine. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because you need help pitching your tents. Yes, and that's what we do over here at camp. Maybe you're, in line waiting for a concert somewhere and you just need something to lean on. Who knows? Maybe you just need help pleasing the special man or woman in your life. And Blue Chew is going to help you lay it down, okay? An amazing service that's coming straight to your door. And for the listeners of this very program, they are going to get their first month of Blue Chew for free. All you need to use is the promo code GAGNON, Gagnon, and you'll have them gagging. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm saying, my boy. So go to bluechew.com and try the promo code GAGNON, Gagnon, and you're going to get your first month free. All you got to do is pay $5 for shipping. That's like a coffee, okay? So to skip your morning cold brew and instead get that hard brew for an entire month. Yes, that is at bluechew.com. Use the promo code GAGNON and start laying it down like they deserve. Let's get back to the show. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because I got to tell you a story. Imagine you're sitting in your house. It's cold outside. It's a little snowy. And you're like, man, I just want a panini. So you go and you order it, from DoorDash or something like that. And it never gets to you. You're looking at the app. You're like, dude, it's been 4 hours. Where's my panini? You're calling. No one answers. Well, this is a true story that happened. There was a woman, a client, that was working as a DoorDash driver, and she slipped and fell on an icy walkway outside of a Panera Bread in Fort Wayne, Indiana. She breaks her elbow, which leads to surgery and hardware having to get inserted into her arm. She can't work. And originally, she sues Panera, and Panera was like, okay, we'll give you like $125,000. But then the good people over at Morgan & Morgan fought for her and got her the $1 million verdict that she deserved. Yes. If you never heard of them, Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Yes, and they're that way for a reason. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. Now, I'll be honest, if I ordered, a panini and the woman gets paid $1 million because she slipped, I mean, it's a tragic thing to happen, of course, but I deserve a little bit of that. I should get a cut at least, right? I'm the one that ordered the panini. If I never ordered that panini, she never would have slipped, never got $1 million, which obviously she deserved. You know what I mean? But maybe next time she gets $1.1 million, I can get a cool 100,000 out of that. Regardless, all I'm saying is if you're ever injured and you are looking to get the money that you deserved, the compensation that is entitled to you from your injuries, Morgan & Morgan could be the way to go. Hiring the wrong law firm can be disastrous. I mean, you can be locked up in litigation. It's a nightmare. But hiring the right law firm could substantially increase your settlement. And with Morgan & Morgan, it's easy to get started. Their fee is $0 unless they win. That's right. Their fee is free unless they win your case. You don't pay you pay 0 cents unless they win your case. You can visit forthepeople.com/Gagnon, Gagnon. That is forthepeople.com/Gagnon, or dial pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. That's forthepeople.com/Gagnon, or click the link in the description below. And thank you so much to the good folks over at Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this program and making this show possible with this paid advertisement. Well, let's get back to the show. Over the decades since 1959, numerous theories have been made to try to explain what actually happened to the Dyatlov group. And these range from everything from natural phenomena to human interference to the military. Some of the earliest theories was an avalanche, and some people still hold true to this. Some researchers suggest that a sudden snow slab could have struck the tent, injuring many of the hikers and basically forcing them to cut their way out. But when investigators reached the site, the evidence didn't exactly add up. The tent was on a small 15-degree slope, whereas avalanches usually occur on slopes that are 30 degrees or more. Sure, it's possible, but it's just not typical. There were no signs of a slide path or debris, and most compelling of all, the footprints were actually still visible in the snow. Now, oddly enough, the UFO theories have some plausibility to, obviously the UFO community. Witnesses from nearby areas reported seeing these large, bright orange lights moving across the sky on February 1st and 2nd. Remember, even prosecutor Ivanov admitted to seeing these lights in the sky. These theories suggest that the hikers encountered, some type of unknown craft, which could explain why they ran away, and the strange injuries and the radiation, and how strange and sort of violent the injuries are. Now, even if it's not UFOs, which it's not UFOs. Military theories suggest that the group could have maybe accidentally encountered a secret Soviet military test, possibly involving nuclear weapons or new weapons people didn't know about, or aircraft, or who knows what, which could explain the elevated radiation levels on some of the clothes and the reports of strange lights. However, when you strip away the conspiracy theory lens and remember that several group members had worked at nuclear facilities, it could very much explain the radiation contamination on their clothes. But of course, just the very fact that some of the hikers were involved in nuclear sites led to speculation that the whole trek was actually a planned nuclear test set up by the government. And then there's also the Yeti theory or the Sasquatch thing, which emerged partially due to just how remote into the wilderness it is. And then of course there's Russian folklore that that many, Russians and Soviets at the time would talk about. They would talk about the Menk, which is this, Yeti-like creature that lived up in the mountains. They also noted that the Mansi people had told these stories of dangerous supernatural creatures that basically inhabited these high places in the mountains, and they looked like these giant man-like beings that would prey on human beings that wandered too far. Now, proponents of this theory point to, the massive force that would cause these injuries and, arguing that only a creature of enormous strength could actually cause these external wounds. Some of the footprints at the scenes were even described as being strange. Some people described them as being larger than human feet, but this is likely due to the fact that they were wearing socks or, minimal footwear that maybe created a distorted impression on the snow. Now, one of the final images taken from the trek actually shows what some people claims is a Yeti. But a lot of people that, they also claim that this might just be one of the hikers who set up a camera on a stand and walked out into the frame to take a picture of himself. You can see the picture here and it will kind of contextualize. It is sort of ominous, but you can see where the theory comes from. So either way, the single image is responsible for the 60-year-old theory that they were killed by some sort of ominous Yeti thing. In 2019, 60 years after the incident, Russian authorities actually reopened the investigation in an effort to use modern forensic techniques and computer modeling to re-examine what happened. Now, the official conclusion that was done in 2019 pointed to a specific type of avalanche called a katabatic avalanche or a delayed slab avalanche. Now, according to this theory, the hikers were forced to cut their way out of their tent when they maybe started to hear the break in the snow, or the snow started to accumulate against it, and it created a risk of collapse or suffocation. Now, the investigators used computer modeling software to show how a delayed avalanche could have occurred several hours after the hikers had actually set up their camp, potentially triggered by their presence or changes in the wind conditions. So the official story goes like this. The hikers would have fled the tent to avoid being buried, and so they cut their way out, and they left, somewhat quickly. They became separated and disoriented in the darkness and the extreme cold, and the injuries found on 4 of the victims would have been the result from the force of the avalanche and their falls into the ravine. Now, however, the official explanation still leaves some of the questions unanswered. Why were the footprints so calm and evenly spaced? Why were 2 bodies found in their underwear? Why were some hikers wearing the clothes of their dead friends? And where did these chemical burns come from? And what about the lights in the sky? That picture of the Yeti thing, right? Remember that? So the Dyatlov Pass Incident is still one of the most studied and debated mysteries in modern history. I mean, you have this combination of these experienced hikers, extreme conditions, weird evidence, government secrecy of kind of folding up this whole story, and it just creates the perfect storm for speculation. And what makes this case really compelling is that it involves, these experienced people that should have been able to handle these winter conditions, yet something caused them to abandon their shelter altogether. Now, the incident has inspired numerous books and movies, and today, the pass where the tent was found has actually been officially renamed to Dyatlov Pass in honor of the leader of the group. And perhaps most importantly, the case kind of just highlights just how crazy nature is, right? Like even the most experienced hikers with the right equipment can face these situations where even like a small mistake or like a weird unexpected event can get you and 8 of your friends killed. Now, whether the official avalanche explanation is correct or other factors were involved, 9 experienced hikers died in circumstances that we honestly still can't confirm. Now, today, Dyatlov Pass is a tourist destination where people can walk on the same path that the 9 hikers did. There's even a memorial at the exact location where the group's tent was found, and people go there, every year to leave all sorts of trinkets and things to honor their memory. Now, what do we think about this? I don't know. I mean, there's a great website for the record, dyatlovpass.com, I think is what it's called, and it has like all the photos, all the evidence, like super, super detailed stuff that seems like super granular, but if you're obsessed with this case and you're fascinated by it, I would recommend you go check it out. I really think the avalanche thing makes the most sense. Like, look, these guys work at a nuclear facility. They might have some, radiation on their clothes. That seems very obvious to me. Why are the other people like naked? It's like, okay, maybe they found the bodies of their dead homies and like, hey, we're freezing to death. We can't find our camp. We're going to take your guys' stuff. Why were the branches all broken? It's like, oh, maybe someone else tried to climb it. Like, to me, it seems obvious like, okay, the avalanche comes, bang. They're like, oh, we're about to get crushed by this specific type of avalanche. This is pretty sketchy. They didn't think the avalanche was going to come because they were on the right slope. They were like, oh, this is not avalanche territory. But they didn't realize that there was a specific type of avalanche that actually just kills hikers on this specific part of the mountain. So it happens. They're like, oh shit, we're about to die. They cut their way out. They're like, okay, let's just walk down a little bit, wait for this avalanche to pass because this avalanche is literally going to just like swallow us up if we don't get out of here. They walk out. They go, let's just wait a minute. We'll go back. The group gets separated. They can't find their way back. Eventually, the big group finds the 2 guys that are, in their underwear, and they're obviously not in their underwear at the time. They have jackets. They take their jackets. They try to climb the tree to like see if they can like find where their camp is. They can't find it. They go back down. They go back to, where the rest of them are. Like, why are there like, they have injuries and stuff like that? I'm like, dude, they're like completely getting frozen to death. I'm sure they fell at some point and cracked their heads. Why are their eyes missing? It's like, okay, animals came and ate their bodies.
Do animals do that, though?
What?
Do they pick out your eyeballs?
Yeah, dude, this is like the whole thing. You ever seen a vulture going to town on a possum?
Oh, good point.
That's just like what they just be out here, bro. That's a freebie.
About the radiation, isn't there radiation the higher you go up in altitude? So it makes sense.
That's an interesting question. Can you get a fact check on that? I've never really heard that, but it might be possible. I mean, what is the sun, dude? That's full radiation, and you're closer to the sun. Duh. I think that tracks, Christos. But also, it's like, dude, they work at a nuclear facility.
Right.
They're like, that seems so obvious. It's like, yeah. I'm also like, what kind of lamps are they using? Do they have like flashlights that happen to have like radiation stuff in them? I don't know if you can even power a flashlight on radiation stuff, but I don't know. That's just my theory. So again, I know everyone is like, dude, it was a giant, terrifying beast. I'm like, probably not, because they would have just ravaged them. They wouldn't have escaped. Like they would have got murked. Is the radiation thing true?
It's experienced by people in mountainous areas, passengers, and on airplanes. So yeah.
Elevated levels of radiation.
Correct.
I wonder if they're statistically or like categorically significant that you'd be like, oh, this is the right level. Again, you can probably find this exact info on the website, which people should check out. But I think that's the most compelling thing to me. Like the Russian military testing thing. Like I've even read theories about this where it's like, oh, the military knew that they were going, so they were using them as test subjects. I'm like, dude, there's no way the military is going to use like their Russian nuclear engineers on a hike with their buddies to like murk them out in the mountains.
But if they're going to get killed anyway, they don't mind the research that was...
Why are they going to kill them anyway? What do you mean?
Like if they're going to die anyway.
Oh, you're saying the avalanche thing plus the military thing?
Exactly.
That's a cool theory. I've never heard that one before.
Jackpot.
So they actually find them and they say, hey, we're not going to save them. We're actually going to use this for testing. But then their bodies aren't like nuked. If their bodies were like obliterated and their campsite was just blasted off the earth, then I'd be like, well, maybe. But I'm like, come on. I don't buy it. I'm like, look, I don't.
How do you feel about the living ones taking the dead ones' clothes? That's
completely, yeah, duh. Dude, you're dying. You're freezing to death. I would take your shirt just like if I was chilly. You know what I mean? Like, are you crazy? I get cold. Yeah, duh. Like, I think that is the most normal thing in the world. Like, yeah, sorry, dude. Like, it'd be crazy if one of them like murked the other one, if they were like, yeah, we're going to put you out and then jack your shit because I'm going to die and you're. That would be crazy. I don't know if anyone's brought that theory up. Oh.
Cutting the tent from inside out?
If you hear the avalanche, you can actually hear the ice breaking, and you're like, oh, shit, something's happening.
You don't have time to unzip?
Dude, it's 1950 zippers, dude. You got to just be like, hey, we're about to get swallowed by an avalanche any second. Let's get the hell out of here.
You'd rather grab a knife and cut as opposed to unzip?
Yeah, bro. They're sleeping with their knives. They're absolutely locked in. I think we also got to look at the zippers of these tents. It's not like you're thinking of like a Coleman, 2025 tent. I don't think that's what we're dealing with here. I think these are like industrial giant zippers with probably like 3 layers you got to unzip,
Might not even be zippers. Could be like a tying situation.
Could be a tying situation. That's the thing, dude. That is the absolute thing. I would actually, can we get a fact check on that? That's a great question. Because everyone's like, dude, they cut their way out. I'm like, yeah, dude, we don't even know what was going on. This is 1950s Soviet Russia. They need to be warm in their tents. I don't think these are like little camping tents that people are normally talking about,
There was a form of a zipper starting in 1917. So
okay, I'm sure they had a zipper. I'm saying it was heavy duty. The zipper on this tent is heavy duty. It's like a whole thing.
It's a double zipper.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Imagine you're in here. What would be faster? Zip, or you just cut your way out if you think you're about to get swallowed by an avalanche?
You're naked? You got a knife next to you? What's that?
You're in it. Yes, Christos. You're camping. Of course, like you're not naked. You're in your underwear. Because again, you're wearing like these massive heavy coats all day. You're not going to sleep in your giant coat. You're just going to like pop in your sleeping bag, knock out, wake up, keep it moving. That's the most compelling thing to me. I really think that makes the most sense. Now, what's interesting about this is that the evidence in the way it shows up, people just draw all their own theories. They're like, dude, they found the bodies. They were missing eyes. Something came and sucked their eyes out of their head. It's like, no, they died and then also animals. Or people are like, oh, they cut the tent from the inside. What must have happened? A supersonic weapon? And I'm like, an avalanche. Like, it's just like, this is again a kind of an Occam's razor thing. It's like the most likely explanation is the one that's the simplest. And typically is, I think that I'm all for conspiracy theories. Don't get me wrong. But I just think this one, I'm going to go gun to my head. I'm saying avalanche. With that said, what 23-year-old is going with his boys to go hike for a week and a half in the worst terrain of all time? That's like, look.
They're fucking Soviets.
They are Soviets, and you guys are wild people. Technically, Soviets don't exist anymore. The Russians, though, y'all are crazy. And look, no disrespect, all right? R.I.P. to the dead. Pour one out for all the homies. Sure. Don't do that. Don't go to the mountains. Don't disappear into the mountains and be like, yeah, I'll hit y'all up in 2 weeks. If we don't come back, look for us. You're 23 years old. Drink vodka. You have the hottest women in the world. This is post-world. Dude, Russian women are like by far. Maybe not by far, but like pristine.
Sure.
Pristine. And this is post-World War II. All the men just died. There's now all these women that are now populating Moscow, St. Petersburg. I think technically Stalingrad still. Or Leningrad. I can't remember.
Yeah.
All that. Oh yeah, it's Leningrad, I think. But I don't know if they changed it to St. Petersburg yet. Anyway, all I'm saying is that there's beautiful Russian women walking around, and you're like, it'd be a fun weekend. Just be gone for 2 weeks in the snow. Not that they deserved it. No one deserves this. But they deserve it more than like me. Because I'm not doing this kind of stuff. This is the way that I think, like, the way black people look at white people, this is how white people look at like Russians. We're like, dude, that is white people shit. Like, y'all are doing too much. Just chill. Drink some vodka. Go to a bathhouse. You have a banya over there. Just chill. You know what I mean? You don't need to do all this.
Haven't you had multiple camping trips?
Yeah, I like to camp in moderate temperature. I love camping, as you can see. Take a look. But I like to do it in Brooklyn, New York, in a air-conditioned room. Not where we are. Obviously, we're deep in the wilderness. I also, every time I camp, it is like end of summer, like springtime. It's moderate, not a ton of mosquitoes, depending where you are in the country, obviously. I have yet to do snow camping, which I would consider. But it just like, guys, this is crazy. I bet you sleep so good though. I bet you go snow camping, you go through this whole thing, you're hiking all day, you get in your tent and you just hear the wind outside. Oh, I bet you that sleep hits crazy. Anyway, now if this story sounds familiar to you, it's because I did an entire episode on it with my dear friend Casey Rocket. And we talk about that with we also talk about a bunch of other like crazy sort of unsolved mystery, lost footage, just like, crazy little wormholes. If you enjoyed this episode, there's this plus much more with the brilliant and hilarious Casey Rocket. You can check that in the description. And yeah, that's all I have really to say about Dyatlov Pass. Anything else you'd like to contribute, Christos?
Nope.
So there you go. In the end, no one really knows what's going on. And it may never be fully known what exactly happened, but the incident continues to, capture imaginations, my imagination for sure, and just reminds us once again that some questions maybe have no answers. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Dyatlov Pass Incident. If you are familiar with this, if you've researched, if you've gone through the whole website, if you've seen other videos on it, please let me know. Is there anything I missed? Is there anything I got wrong? Anything I glanced over? If you've never heard of this, what'd you learn? Is there anything that you came away with? What's your theory? What do you think happened? And I implore you to comment, not only because it's, just a nice little community we got built in the comments, but in addition to that, the top comment on this video and all the future videos going forward is getting free merch. Yeah, we're going to hook you up. I don't know how exactly we're going to find you, but we will go in the comments, and I'm going to send an agent directly to your house, and we will deliver it to you by hand, by force. That part is not true. But we will get you some merch. If you drop a comment, we will hook you guys up. And you can buy merch, obviously, Camp R&D, all that good stuff. Make sure you subscribe to History Camp, Religion Camp. We get into all sorts of cool stuff over there. Similar vibes, but obviously more niche. And you can come see me on the road, Mark Gagnon Live. That's where you can find me, markgagnonlive.com. We'll drop that link in the description as well. I will be doing, unfortunately, just a perfect hour of stand-up comedy. Just phenomenal. I mean, God's gift, Modern day philosophers over here.
If you may say so yourself.
And I do, because if I don't do it, no one else will. No, it's going to be a great hour of stand-up comedy. We have, a good time. I do a bunch of stuff at the end with the audience. I bring a bunch of great openers. It is a wonderful show. And the rooms are pretty small for now, so come on out, have an intimate time with your boy. So you can check me out on the road. I got all my dates there, and I will see you guys at History Camp, Religion Camp, and of course here at Camp Gagnon. Thank you for joining me in my tent. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.